Recording in progress.
Play, greetings. Um, Welcome to another video. Um, just might make this a short one, but I recently heard another Indian speak on Walter Plecker, and I just want to say this. Just because an Indian speaks to what another Indian says, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's smoke between the Indians, you know. But I, as an Indian, I feel like if I hear something that it's like I finding that I can't receive it, you know, I feel like I need to respond to it. And I don't have to, again, this is not necessarily to call out Indians. It's just that I think we are hearing a lot of narratives and even things that I might say, of course, there'll probably always be Indians that disagree, and so it's just, I guess it's just a fact of life or something. So again, this is not to like piss off some Indian, but I think it, again, I'm listening and I'm applying, and then I'm seeing if it how it sits with me. Now this would be maybe last week. So that's how long it's been in my head. And actually the person has made at least a couple of videos since the video speaking to Walter Plecker. So what was said, which I'd never heard, and that's why it jarred me, is that it was suggested that what Walter Plecker did was not necessarily, uh, shall we say, against Indians. I paraphrasing, but the general idea is, what if we look closer at what he did? Was he trying to uh, just deal with Negropeans? And it never occurred to me that that could be what he was actually trying to do, a good thing, you know? So that was my initial response, was like, as I'm listening, I'm like, huh? I couldn't help it. And so I'm just trying to share, my reaction to that notion. I don't know if any Indians have ever heard, that this was not against Indians, really. Here's what I want to say, y'all. Here's what, and I'm going to ask, the ancestors to uh let me say this, how it occurred to me in the most uh transparent way possible, honest way possible. What I want to say is, what Indians will find in this whole drama is that somehow, some mysterious way, you're not being factored in. And I think my response to an idea that Walter Plecker was only dealing with Negropeans or something to that effect. I'm not even sure I'm saying it right, but it occurred to me that, are we giving Walter Plecker a pass? Somehow it's like this didn't affect us in a negative way. I'm not sure. Uh, and so my response, it was not receptive. And so, as the days go by, am I more receptive, or how's it sitting with me? And again, I would have to say that even if it somehow was not meant to directly affect Indians, I think the travesty is in the invisibility. Like, okay, so you're not excluding Indians. It's like we're just not there. You know what I'm saying? So that is the crime. Like, and if we look at it, this has always been. It's like somewhere. So we can say this: oh, you Indians shouldn't think that the corporation was coming for you. It was just dealing with Negropeans, and you just fell in by accident, and no one ever, uh, uh, saw it fit to remind you that, oops, you're not supposed to be included here. Uh, Indians, let us not give too many passes out, okay? Because it will have the effect of doing exactly what's being done to us, just a genocide of your existence. As far as I'm concerned, and I just have to say it the way I feel it, Walter Plecker gets no pass from me. He gets no pass from me. I mean, we can argue it was somehow divinely inspired. I disagree. See, this is the problem when we are buying too much into the Bible narrative. And I just have to say it how I feel it. It's not to offend anyone, but again, it affects. Okay, you could say you're like a baby waking up. You're just a baby Indian. Maybe you don't understand. Regardless, babies cry, and they cry for a reason. It might be the most honest cry you'll get. So even as just an awakening Indian, if something is hitting me wrong, it's like it's not a time for us to be quiet any longer, Indians. And I mean that in so many ways. Like, this code of silence that we have on the internet, it has to stop. You have to speak your sovereignty into being. Do not be ashamed to speak your sovereignty, because this is what this was the goal, was to shut you. Okay, back then you couldn't even say you're an Indian. This is not that time. So everything you have to say about being an Indian, you better say it. I mean, hopefully it's positive and it helps other Indians. That's the goal here. But even in this video, that's the goal. I maybe people can, if they care to, maybe some kind of poll. Who thinks that what Walter Plecker did was not really against Indians? It was just we didn't understand what he was trying to do, or something like that. again, it was Walter Plecker's not really ensuring that Indians would not be negatively affected. So the idea is perhaps, oh, he wanted to make sure that Negropeans weren't putting themselves down as Indians. Um, Even if that's the case, wouldn't that affect Indians coming into the corporation as we're being under duress to join the corporation? So in other words, Walter Plecker just magically appears to make sure that Negropeans are not identifying as Indians, but at the same time, Indians couldn't identify as Indians. You see, this is what I'm talking about. It's not like anybody was trying to preserve our identity, least of all Walter Plecker. I mean, Indians, we can't get too jiggy with this. Next, we'll be saying, oh, well, that's what we are saying. The paper genocide was not really a paper genocide. It was just to ensure that Negropeans didn't put themselves down. Well, we wouldn't have cared. As Indians, we would not have cared if Negropeans identified as Indians because we saw them as ourselves, which is, I think, why we got involved in the Revolutionary War. Okay, well, somebody might say, no, we was fighting to help free the white people. So it just becomes very convoluted. Uh, it's very, very convoluted. But even in the chaos, I don't, again, given a pass to a policy like that of Walter Plecker, I believe it's a mistake. It's a brush that's too broad. It's a brush that it's knocking. It's a bull in a china shop. It's we could justify and say no, he didn't mean to knock us down when he uh bulldozed the china shop. He didn't. He thought the real Indians would just somehow magically stand up in the midst of him mowing us all down based on our color. See, that's another thing. Indians look just like Negropeans. So if Walter Plecker is fucking with Negropeans, it's especially just going purely by what you look like. Would not Indians be negatively affected by a policy that says you cannot identify as Indians? Now they're saying it's a one-drop rule. Is that true? No, it's not true. Did they go around with a little blood kit, doing some kind of DNA work? No, they took one look at you. That was the one look. And you were black, even if you put Indian. See, what Walter Plecker did was wrong on so many levels. So many levels. Again, are we saying that your Negropeans were treated so bad that they wanted to identify as Indian? But it was not a prize to be an Indian at that time. Listen, we couldn't be Indian or Negropean at that time because both were being treated the same. bad. I maybe I misunderstood what I heard, but what I thought I heard was that what Walter Plecker was doing, are we misreading that somehow, and we don't understand that he was, what he did was somehow good. I don't think so. I just don't think so. And it's not to come up against uh the Indian who said that. It's just it in my heart of hearts, I don't see how embracing Walter Plecker's policy would not be an offense to our ancestors. So it's almost like I would have to say, no, what he did didn't negatively affect our ancestors. That was just something he did to the Negropeans, and we just too sensitive, or we shouldn't take it personal, or we not seeing with insight. What Walter Plecker did, there is no way that he cared if it negatively affected those who were actually Indians. That was the disregard. There was nothing done to make sure that those who put down Indian and who were actually Indian were protected from being called Black, because this was done behind their back. A census was taken, y'all. Our people who identified as Indian put Indian down. Now, were they not disrespected when that census taker turned around, walked away, and scratched out what you wrote and put you down as Black? Is that not somehow not a crime? Are we saying what Walter Plecker did is not a crime against Indians? Since we can't use humanity, I guess. Come on, Indians. I think we can do better. I think we can do better. So I I actually uh cut and paste a document that I'm going to I just want to put it up, and just so we can have a better how do you say, perspective on what was going on. Was this just something to make sure Negropeans what weren't who were slaves, which, oh God, that's the thing. It's so convoluted, because you got Negropeans who I guess are being seen as African slaves, and you got to wonder, is that what they were? That's why there's a lot of chaos involved in this conversation, because what it is, it's not the white element that's making this chaotic. It is the Negropean and the African that can be intertwined with the American Indian. And this is what's being done on purpose. This is where the chaos is really doing a number. So actually, Caucasians simplify it a little bit, because you can't confuse them with the other three. But what was being done by the Negropean nobility, like King James, was to confuse. See, this is a Moorish thing. That's what it is. It's a Moorish thing. And I'm talking black Moor. This was what their masterpiece idea to take down India with a little help from the Iroquois. This is why this conversation is so very confusing. We have an element from Africa, we have an element from Europe, and the European and the African are basically, these, all I can say is these are the two that are inserting themselves into our legacy. The white man and woman can't do it as easily. But the Negropean and the African, they can take a stab at it, shall we say. So let's look at this and just, I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Oh, here we go. And it's just a short thing I made so that we can get a better perspective, okay? Because then it will show that this was most definitely against Indians who looked like the African and the Negropean. And it was made, the ultimate goal was to get the Caucasian as a front man and blame the Caucasian for what the Negropean was orchestrating. So let's just take a quick look. We all know about this stuff, but I titled this "The United States Corporation Policy for So-Called Blacks." And the policy basically is the right to self-define based on blood is denied. That's the policy that the corporation has for anybody that they're labeling black. Okay, so that includes Indians, right? And trust me, Indians are the target. Why? Because this is happening on their landmass. So see, where they try to say, oh no, this is against the Negropean, not you American Indians. Oh no, this is against the Africans, not you American Indians. Y'all okay, we ain't not trying to hurt you. But you're on all of this is happening on my landmass. You are most definitely coming for me. And stop with the lies, okay? United States Corporation. And once again, I declare my Indian not taxed status. So when I speak, I'm speaking from the place of a sovereign, okay? I'm not, this is not to be seen and best not be seen as terroristic, because what it actually is Indian genocide that would be taking place, okay? It's a form of American Indian genocide, okay? That's what's going on here all day, every day, 24/7, 369 days of the year. Okay, that's how much this is going on. Okay, so the United States Corporation policy for so-called whites, the right to self-define regardless of blood is granted. So you American Indians come along talking about, I got 99.999% Indian blood, I'm Indian. The corporation says, step back, Negro, you black, okay? Now, that same corporation that's ignoring your bloodline, because of the doctrine of discovery, which has been denounced, by the way. So all of this should be in the process of being reversed. But if Indians, again, don't stand up for their status and insist upon being a corporate franchise to be dominated by the corporation, then you'll never get your birthright. Okay? You never will. But like the Iroquois would say, oh, that's okay. I'm getting a big payday. I don't need that stupid birthright. The Iroquois, that would be where they're saying someone who despised their birthright, that would be Iroquois. I said it. Yeah, I said it. Yeah, I said it. What Iroquois could even talk against that? I mean, when you look in the dictionary, there's your picture under traitor, along with some others, but you definitely the American one. So why do I talk about the Iroquois like this? Again, we don't advocate violence against the Iroquois. Mm-mm. They can still step up and clear up all this mess. And as we see, it hasn't really happened yet. So I don't think there even is an admittance of the role they play in all of this. And again, Indians, you could say, oh, you're bothering us with your personal beef with Iroquois. Not so personal, though, when we factor in that there are no quote unquote Negro looking American Indians seen as American Indians as a result of what the Iroquois was about. So this is not just an Iroquois Algonquin type of situation. Okay. So again, two different policies for the caste system to work. Okay. So you have the same corporation that denies a group of people. That's the key here to who the real American Indian is. That's the magic key. There's an active denial, an active denial. If we weren't the Indians, the corporation wouldn't work so damn hard to deny us that. What other people are denied self-definition? Now they're going to say it's because you were slaves, but American Indians were not slaves. We were more prisoners of war and indentures because this was our land. And the reason why we were indentures, because the doctrine of discovery deemed us heathen. And that meant that their God can have their people just steal our shit for eternity if we let it. And the Iroquois like, I'm okay with that. Because you get paid either way, right, Iroquois? That's the deal, right? So y'all that think that this Iroquois thing is that's no never mind. I think you should think again. Again, we don't advocate violence against the Iroquois. What we advocate is the truth of the situation. Okay? And they can always change their ways. Right? So again, we have a government corporation, and this is for people out there who really don't understand why is it like this. Again, if you're a colonizer on the lands of the people you're colonizing, wouldn't it be in your best interest to not allow them to identify as the people of that land? For those who really are, well, why y'all black people think that y'all Indians? Oh, we don't think, we know. We got the scars to prove it. but look at the screen, and that might help. That might help others who are new to this kind of talk to understand. Indians were never, the Indians that we know of, were never denied their right to identify as Native Americans or even Indians. There's only one group of people that were politically denied identifying as an Indian. And again, this is where I need the college level brains to stand up. What was so great about being a Native American that quote unquote blacks would have to be denied being quote unquote Native American or Indian? Were they getting treated better? So the idea is, if you're oppressing a people, Indians or black, why does it matter? You're oppressing both of them, right? So it's not like they were denying blacks being treated like whites, you see. Whites were being primed and groomed, again, to be the front man of the operation. So they were going to gradually get better and better treated no matter what, right? Even if they were treated bad in the beginning, that was just for appearances. This was planned out. It wasn't an accident. Monarchs do not do things by accident when it's to this magnitude. This was planned out. It was put in scripture. And people will say it was prophecy. No, it wasn't. What happened to American Indians was not a prophecy. It was a plan. It was a plan. That is why you have the king's hands on a Bible. That is why you have a Bible version that was produced by a king. It's the same king that colonized North America, isn't it? Is that a coincidence? Do you not think that that book was a tool he used to get what he needed done? King George didn't rely on a Bible. That Negro said, look, I'm a king. I'll stand on my own props. King James, he needed to believe, or to have us believe, that somehow God was the one directing his movements. Well, you see, when your God is Set or Satan, well, then you'll think that that's what you're doing. Something for God. That's why when many will accuse King George of being the slave or the one who did slavery, not King James, I say, I call BS, y'all. I call BS. At least this man, King George, was real about his shit. Again, King James, he used God. to justify his bullshit. Okay, so I'm talking and talking, and you probably read all of this already because it's not long, and I'm glad I made it short because this should be a short video likewise. So let's just read. I didn't even read. That's why I put the links here because these are excerpts from the main articles. So if you, and maybe I'll link them in the description box. I always say I'm gonna do things in the description box, but this I will do because it's you probably want to see the whole thing, but the one on the right, I had to kind of fish for this because whereas the Racial Integrity Act, you can look that up and it'll still be shrouded in kind of deceptive language where they'll say, oh, even white people were misclassified. But yeah, but it was an upgrade. And some people were downgraded from their true position. The American Indian, for instance, was actually the only one that was really paid the highest price in this Racial Integrity Act. So I did highlight the point of this is to be very clear how these two episodes, what was the ultimate effect? Who was the target? I'm going to say it again for those with that like high IQ kind of thing going on. Why would blacks be denied being Indians when Indians were being treated bad too? Why would the corporation care when it's out to take something? Wouldn't it be that if we were okay, if wouldn't it be that the Indians would fit the bill in terms of it's not a prize for a quote unquote black to identify as an Indian. So why is the corporation denying only them while granting whites the privilege of our birthright? It's because it's our birthright. That's why. There was no great prize for blacks who identified as Indian. So when Walter Plecker says something about, the slaves were trying to get out of slavery by identifying as Indians, but you weren't treating the Indians any much better, were you? I mean, that's why when you go to look up the Racial Integrity Act, it gets very confusing because somehow it's what's not being said is that an effort had to be made to differentiate blacks from Indians. Why? Because they looked the same. So they find a way to even make their acts look like they weren't doing what the acts were meant to do. You read that Racial Integrity Act, and I swear, sometimes when I've looked at the typical articles on racial integrity, it sounds like mumbo jumbo, and I can't. It's like you have to like try to figure out, well, what's going on? Well, why? How? Why would you need legislation to differentiate blacks from whites to the point where it became that you decided who is black and who's Indian, I should say. Pardon, I didn't mean black or white. Why did you need legislation, again, for the people with the higher IQs in the house? Why would you need legislation to differentiate an Indian from a black unless they were one and the same. And so what did you do? See, this is where I'm saying that Plecker didn't do anything in favor of India. So what Walter Plecker did was say, because Indians and blacks look the same, they cannot define, they have to be denied self-definition. And I will look at them and say that they are black, whether they are Indian or they're black. What I'm trying to say here, Walter Plecker did not care if you were Indian by blood. So you could be a full-blooded Indian. He was not going to allow you to speak that truth. He was not going to allow you to speak your birthright truth. So that would affect Indians who were actually Indians, and that was us. It's very, everything about our history is confusing, and it was meant to be that way because it's hiding high crimes, very high crimes. And what's funny is, even with the doctrine of discovery, you think that they'd be able to openly let you know what's going on, but they are not. They are not. If the doctrine of discovery said that Indians were heathen, why would you protect certain Indians, but another Indian you would deny them being Indian? They're both heathen, according to the doctrine of discovery. So when you have the corporation coming here trying to fool you about its own Racial Integrity Act, we got to question, well, what you're doing is based on the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery, it didn't say that if an Indian looked like a Mongoloid, that they were not heathen. The doctrine of discovery did not look at your race at all. If we go with the doctrine of discovery's narrative, it didn't matter what color you were. If you were not a Christian, you were a heathen. It did not matter. But in America, something odd took place, even though we were the recipients of the doctrine of discovery. They decided, see, that's what you call the BS, y'all, even of the religion. You know, but because somehow I don't think the Church of Rome went out of its way to, how do I say this? In other words, all heathen are heathen, right? It doesn't matter if they are Mongoloid Native Americans or Negro American Indians. They're all not Christian, right? And that's another point of interest, y'all. Weren't we Christians? Weren't the Negropeans Christians? Ooh, Lord, ancestors ain't playing. Weren't the Negropeans Christians? So for you to be singling out, see, this is where that idea that, oh no, he was just doing this against the Negropeans. It doesn't make sense, because the Negropeans were not heathens. Lord have mercy. Uh, you see the chaos involved in this thing? All of this, who is paying the highest price? It would have to be those on the landmass that are most affected, the people of that land. There should not have been any confusion between American Indians and Native Americans. Because the Native Americans shouldn't have been that accessible to slaves who were under lock and key. So they're going to try to, I guess, make us think that slaves were so into running away that they would run off and create a whole group of Indians that we can't tell, So where was all of this intermixing taking place? Because again, slaves were hunted down, weren't they? And basically, what we're told is they got body parts chopped off, they got beat half to death. Where were they escaping to the degree that you needed legislation to figure out, And even the children of even the children between the slave master, the Caucasian slave master, even the children between the Caucasian slave master and the slave, even those children were slaves, right? So where was the Indian? I'm sorry, see, it gets confusing. Where was the Native American being treated so good that it meant you had to separate them from quote unquote African slaves? It's not making sense, y'all, is what I'm trying to say. The only thing that makes sense is that Indians looked just like Africans and Negropeans. Negropeans would have been Christian. And I think that's another thing we overlook sometimes, So they were not subject to the doctrine of discovery. I guess a question would be, what was the African slave trade based off of? What doctrine led to this notion that you could just go to a place and steal people for no reason at all? We're going to take a quick pause and I shall be right back. We're back and we're just going to, here we go. Okay, share, oops. Okay, so let's actually read. Okay. The Racial Integrity Act of 1924 recognized only two races, white and colored. So right there, that lumps Negropeans, Africans, and Indians. So again, the argument that what Walter Plecker did was, it wasn't really against the Indians, really. He was trying to keep the Negropeans at bay. It's just too broad of a brush that too broad of a net that he's casting. So the Racial Integrity Act of 1924 recognized only two races, white and colored. The act required that a racial description of every person be recorded at birth. That's just altogether wrong, because when you think about it, a nation, okay, a nationality, you might have people that don't look the same, right? So this is just a way of denationalizing, of course. And it's a very, shall we say, uncivil thing to do. You don't look at a person and just you decide who they are without them having any say. This Walter Plecker thing is incredibly barbaric, overwhelmingly barbaric. There is nothing civil about it. And that's a word that they like to use, civil. You're civilizing. No, you're not. You're barbarizing. This is barbaric. It's brutish. It's crude. The Racial Integrity Act of 1924 recognized only two races. So what the hell happens to all the others? Well, when you're in a caste system, this is what you do. So, in other words, in Virginia, there only existed coloreds and whites. Okay? Neither of which are even mentioned in the Constitution. 1787 Constitution does not deal with white or colored persons. It's only Indians and free persons in the Constitution. So even a quote unquote white person is not party to the original 1787 Constitution. Something happened that undermined a constitution that only referred to free persons and Indians, not Native Americans either. So you can kind of see that all of us, if you wonder why people are saying that there are no sovereigns in America, here is another clue. They've been changed to white, black, colored, Negro. The Indians and Caucasians and the Negropeans and the Africans, none of these are mentioned in the Constitution. So that is how you undermine, and that's how you discard the tenets of the Constitution. So in the future, the world, as a result of what happened in America, the world will now be keenly aware of how word spells work. The thing that you will now, from now on, ask yourself, if you're anybody in any nation, is, when do they start changing the language of what the people are, how they're described? When do free persons turn into black and white persons when it's not in their constitution? That happens when you're being brought into another jurisdiction, y'all. Free persons and Indians have a specific jurisdiction, or have specific jurisdictions, I should say. So when you create a black and a white person, they are not covered by the Constitution. It's not part of that agreement. When you make an agreement with somebody under a certain name, and then you go and legally change your name, you are no longer bound to that original agreement. This is basic contract that we know this, but because we are all under the spell of legalese and a group of Congress people that are creating all kinds of things that no one asked them to create, by the way. They had 19 integrated functions. They now have over 300. This is what I learned from Anna and the state nationals. So yeah, we went off on a tangent there. That's what's going on. Contracts are being made under a certain name with specific terms. The names change, and suddenly you don't have a republic anymore, but you have democracy. This is how the game is played, y'all. This is how our wise priesthoods and their you know, monarchs, this is how they play this little game that they create, that you didn't know you were one of the pawns in. It's how they do it, y'all. It's a word spell. That's why any book that's coming from either a king or a priesthood, you better watch your P's and Q's. I suggest you don't even bother with it. If you did not write it, I think you're going to have to let it go. If your ancestors didn't write it, or something they wrote was rewritten, I think you better leave that alone. But yeah, we have all kinds of Indians that they're Indians, but they still give a whole lot of credence to the work of the Church of Rome. And they don't even think twice about it. Like, again, I say it's like quoting codes and statutes. Bible verses are great for the people that they apply to. But I thought we Indians understood that in as much as it applied to us, we were the heathen. So and then now the Pope denounced all of that. So that would mean we don't have to go by something that was not ordained by God. If it was ordained by God, I don't know that the Pope could denounce it. You know what I'm saying? Number one, he's not our Pope as American Indians. So that kind of, the point is a little bit moot. But the thing we should understand is that when he denounced it, I don't even know that he mention anything about God when he denounced it. I had a conversation with God, and he told me that what we did was wrong. So he's if unless I'm misunderstanding, this is just something that is coming from his own recognizance. But I guess maybe he'll say that he had a conversation with God. But see, God was all in it when you first declared it. And now that it's being denounced, it's like, I made a mistake. So all that scripture that you used for the doctrine of discovery that was not quite on point, right? Well, I guess they might say, well, you're all Christian now. Yeah, we were Christian when you was kicking our ass, a lot of the American Indians. So that ain't no never mind. It don't matter that we Christian. So that is not the reason why. And then if that was the case, the doctrine of discovery should have been denounced years ago. So what I'm trying to say is, seems to me that this was not ordained by God. And we were never, it wasn't even prophesied that a pope will let us know when the heathen, why didn't scripture say, it told us every way that we were going to be treated. But see, that was a plan. But okay, they're saying that God told them that, that whole Deuteronomy thing. Recently I learned, speaking of Deuteronomy, that, I forgot where I heard it, but please, if you recall it, you could comment on it. But Indian women had to cut their hair. They were forced to cut their hair. And there's a Bible scripture that says that somehow the women were cursed with short hair or something like that. Is that, if I'm correct? But come to find out, no, God didn't do that. The corporation somehow had it where you better not let your hair grow. So how is that a curse from God when it was somehow put into effect like a law, like an edict, a mandate or something? When they making these ratchet, unlawful laws, they call it mandates, executive order. None of this has nothing to do really with our constitutional rights, right? It's just, so there's an example of a quote unquote curse that was not actually a curse, right? If American Indian women were forced to cut their hair at any point, that's a red flag, though. What, so that the scriptures could be fulfilled? Don't God fulfill it? Don't he do that? You tell us that those are curses from him, the Most High, right? But then you got your little agents going around saying, you better not let your hair grow. Okay, so that's not a curse from God. That's the point I'm making here. So what am I saying? We need to let that book go, y'all. I'm sorry, especially when we're using it to like discriminate against Indians. That's like, okay, so now the colonizer used that book against me, and now another Indian is gonna do the same. Oh boy. Oh boy. Anyway, let's continue reading. Plecker, let me see. I'm sorry. The racial, I have to start again. Sorry. The Racial Integrity Act of 1924 recognized only two races.
white and colored, not African American, right? That's another problem here. That's another problem here. Because if Indians were not involved, then it should have been white and African American. You see how confusing this is? The Racial Integrity Act of 1924 recognized only two races, white and colored, not African American. The act required that a racial description of every person be recorded at birth and made marriage between white persons and non-white persons a felony. Wow. Flecker developed the racial criteria behind the act and adhered strictly to the one drop rule. But again, we never heard that they did any blood work. So how do you know how many drops it is? A historical term originating in the South that holds that a person with any trace of African ancestry is considered black. In the South? So Indians were in the South? Hmm. That's where my people are from, right? Where a lot of us are from. Then the corporation came, started squeezing us out of trade in the South to get at that land because that was food. That was the food coming from the South, really. So they had to get their hands on that land, right? Uh, and so they started getting us to move north to play the little corporate games of, oh, let's see if you could be a citizen or not. You know, it's like you can't decide if you want me in the system or not, but to get at my land, you had to somewhat let me in the system because that's the only way you're going to get me off that land. And while you're making sure that I don't profit from that land, you are planning on profiting from it. So get my ass off of it and get me up north so I can start paying you for my living situations somehow, you know, because I don't have no land anymore. So now, you know, it was just so uh so uh planned out, you know. The Racial Integrity Act was subject to the Pocahontas exception, since many influential Virginia families claimed descent from Pocahontas. The legislature declared that a person could be considered white with as much as 1/16 Indian ancestry. So the idea is to erase Indians. One-16. So it's just so many psyops going on because ultimately it's the whites that will be considered Indians that really get the birthright, right? Because you can't really be white and get that birthright. So you have to. So there's multiple psyops. It's like be white, but then be Indian after that. You know, okay, the first step is to get the Indians black. And then the next step is uh make whites the new Indian. This is so crazy. Well, okay. So, mm-mm-mm. Anybody could be an Indian, just but Indians couldn't be Indian. But anybody else could. In spite, uh, I'm sorry, Flecker's policies pressured state agencies to reclassify most citizens claiming Indian identity as colored. So we were just claiming Indian identity because it was like a prize to be an Indian. Meanwhile, the real prize was to be white. We weren't saying we were white, right? But they didn't even want us to be Indian. Why though? The only reason why is because they knew that we were birthright Indian. So Plecker's policies pressured state agencies pressured to reclassify okay, pressured state agencies. So these would have had to been federal pressure from federal because the census was federal. This was the first federal. So what they're not saying is this was a federal pressure on states to reclassify most citizens claiming, oh no, it wasn't most. It was all. That's the article we read. They said all Indians will do. Um, mm, 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 Flecker's policies pressured state agencies to reclassify most citizens claiming Indian uh, wow, identity as color. In spite of a 1930 amendment to the Racial Integrity Act that restored the legal status of some Virginia Indians who lived on reservation lands, you see, this is also a hijack. So now that you got me quarantined on a reservation, now I can be an Indian. But so no, that's how you lessen the population of Indians. So you don't recognize the Indians that are all over the place. Only the ones that are on these little reservations are allowed to be Indians because they have basically they've given up their birthright. When you become a federal Indian, you no longer have claim to the land, is really what's going on here. You don't have any authority because you're in their system. We were supposed to have our own system in order to have any uh, authority on the land that we're supposed to have. Um, yes, the idea is they're still making it. It's almost like when they charmed us into moving north. Now they're trying to charm us into being reservation Indians so that they can dominate. In both cases, it is for the advantage of being able to dominate and make all the policy. They have plenary authority. Congress has plenary authority, not just of Indians, but pretty much everything in America at this point. That was not how this government was designed, y'all. It's not. Okay. So some Indians are okay with staying basically marginalized and not having any power, but just being able to say, oh, look, we're the real Indian. Oh, good. Are you still being taxed? Yeah. Oh, you still going by codes and statutes? Yeah. Oh, okay. You were Indian? Yeah. Then the person just start laughing at uncontrollably at that point, and the Indian be like, "Why you laughing? What's so funny? You don't like my hair, my feathers?" And the person is just, yeah, that's it. Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm laughing at. uh, in spite of a 1930 amendment to the Racial Integrity Act that restored the legal status of some Virginia Indians who lived on reservation lands, Plecker nevertheless believed that they also had African. He believed. You hear me? He believed. And what the fuck does your belief have to do with me? Exactly. Well, he's working for the feds. And they have taken, you know, uh once they got our asses to be citizens, that's when all this can take place. 1868 was the creation of the United States citizen. And now the corporation is, it stamped you with as a pawn piece, and now you're on their game board and they're playing you, and you trying your best to say that you're in control. Meanwhile, you're just like, one of the little playing pieces on the game board. I'm Indian, I'm Indian, I'm Indian. And then the corporation picks you up like a little piece on a game board, and it covers you, and it puts you where you want to be. When they pick you up, that covers your head and your mouth and stuff. I'm Indian. Then shut up and sit your ass over there where I put you on that reservation. But daddy, I said sit down. But I thought yeah, that's the problem. You don't think I do. Now sit your ass down and give me the minutes from that meeting you had. Make sure you ain't planning no smart stuff. That's the kind of Indian we would be now if we were federally recognized, or wait, depending on the feds to do something. Like, you know, it's like it's very, or just being a corporation, because uh, as our last video showed, a corporation is incorporating into the government. Corporation, it's the property of the government. It's a franchise of the government. So just being a corporation alone, besides being federally recognized or not, being a corporation, we're still franchise property of the federal government. Uh, Nevertheless, Walter Plecker believed that they also had African ancestry. He just ignoring your entire birth or line or your lineage, and he believes you have African ancestry, and classified them as color. And why didn't you just call us African? This is all to cause chaos, y'all. This is just all to cause chaos. So he's creating a new category of Indian that to cast doubt on them being Indians. Meanwhile, we're the real Indians because we're the only ones again that can't define themselves as Indians without the government getting involved. Everyone else can, they're encouraged to be Indians. Quote unquote black people are the only ones in a time of slavery and in a time of freedom that we have a system that still is marginalizing us because all their federally recognized tribes require that we be listed on the Dawes rolls, in which that's our other column on the right. So they are monitoring what kind of Indians a quote unquote black person can be via you have to have been on the Dawes roll in their system, or if you do identify as an Indian, you have to incorporate, because one way or another, the corporation is going to not give you your birthright or recognize your birthright. This is why we have to go back to the linguistic areas, and that's where our sovereignty is coming from. So I like to say, like, Indians don't live on Long Island; they live on Algonquin. We're gonna roughly call it territory, but we're not using territory in the sense that it's a British acquisition. Okay, we're talking Indian territory and not British territory. Okay, so you know that the word spells are really incredible. So any Northeast uh quote unquote colored person who is still in the Northeast and have been there for as long as their family knows, you're Algonquin. You're Algonquin linguistic. And so that's what when we build, I see they build their system on the states. Again, we're going to build our system on our linguistic lines. That's the beginning of our sovereignty. But you know, we can't be in a state to have our sovereignty. We have to, our sovereignty is based on our birthright. Our birthright is based on the land that we are from. We are not from New York. We are from like Powhatan territory, you know, something like that. That's how we have to use our paperwork that we create. We're not using anybody's paperwork but our own, based on our linguistic map and, you know, where we are grabbing our sovereignty from. We have to call the land what it was called when we were in charge. That's how we establish our sovereignty, our full birthright sovereignty. See, they set it up. What they did in America is so. I wanted to say that this is why America is so singularly important to the world. Every other landmass was founded basically on this system that ended up being brought to America. So they went around the world and perfected this system of slavery. When the Moors did this, the reason why they could do this was because the people that they are dealing with were basically genetically altered by the Moors themselves. So they took a domination over the people. They couldn't do that with American Indians because we come from the same stock. They did not create us, so they couldn't have dominion over us. They naturally take this dominion over Mongoloids and all other people. The reason why it's so hard to take an American Indian down is because they don't have creation authority over us. The only way they could do it was by creating a whole new religion to impose upon us and then force it on us, because they knew that we even knew that that wasn't our origin story. So they had to force that on us using basically gunpowder. And then they want to talk about gun laws. It was okay when you used them against us, and that's how you got a lot of this going. Apparently, Indians didn't have guns, and yet we are so seen so uncivil, right? But these offshoots of the priesthood, they were packing, right? So that's how they were able to dominate, you know, through indoctrination and a little bit of gunpowder power. And it makes them seem so big and bad. Oh, wait, we can't discard the importance of media and a some kind of network that can be broadcast 24/7. So it's all a game of like smoke and mirrors and a little bit of gunpowder that got Indians fooled. They had to fool us. Okay. So anyway, did I finish this? Okay. Plecker nevertheless believed that they also had African ancestry, the Indians, and classified them as colored. This policy has left a modern day legacy where Virginia's Indians struggle to achieve federal recognition. Nope. See, we shouldn't even be in that struggle. See, this is the hijack, y'all. Making it like they got something we want. You don't have anything we want or need except what you took and holding in some kind of trust as if we're dead. Trust but for dead people. We're very much alive, so we don't need a trust. This policy has left a modern day legacy where Virginia's Indians struggle to achieve federal recognition. This is the same federal system that reclassified them in the first place, mind you. This is why this is so ass backward to me. They make it like we have no other alternative, and we do. It's just not in their system, and it won't be found there. And I don't know if Indians understand that. This is not a game, y'all. Anything that appears like an easy way to get where we're going, we have to understand that it's not. We have to build our shit. But the wonderful thing is that will give us the sovereign authority that is our birthright. And now that they are so conscientious of crimes against indigenous people, we could use that as a means to show them that, hey, then you need to give us our land back. If you created an UNDRIP and an ADRIP, which we're not under that jurisdiction at all. I know those laws sound very appealing, but I promise you it's taking you outside of your jurisdiction. It's you're in some other jurisdiction outside of your landmass, a shared jurisdiction. And we got to understand that a shared jurisdiction is going to lead to what will foundate one world system. We don't need a shared system. We don't need it. Now they will make you think, oh, you need this to keep the peace. Doesn't seem like it's doing that. So then that's not what it does. In fact, it seems like it could basically be the organizers of such, not the preventers of it. That's when they have a whole international reach. That's what they can do. We really don't want this kind of reach. And we definitely don't want to be part of it. In other words, if you don't control your national, how the hell do you think you're going to control an international? Maybe that's the way to say it. Because it's really hard to get Indians to get their head out of the international commercial jurisdiction. I'll say it again. If you have no authority in your national jurisdiction, how the hell do you think you're going to have authority in an international? Only the heads of those nations will have that kind of authority. Just like here. Those that are at the heading in Congress and all of that. They're the ones doing all the talking. It's not the people's voice or whatever, right? So on the international scene, that's what you're getting. It's not the people. I think Indians need to really, really really think about a drip and undrip. Really think about it. We seem to keep falling for the same old tricks. And we have to understand that we don't have those kind of allies in the world. If we did, someone would have told us, and I do believe some tried, and they were dealt with, shall we say. Some people try to tell us, but we don't even believe them, right? But they're far few between. They say it and then they somehow go underground, disappear, whatever. They are not the leaders that are pushing this international jurisdiction. Okay. Okay. Indians have to be aware of when they're being led away from their own landmass into a larger ocean. If you're drowning in the swimming pool, you're as good as dead in the international ocean. This policy has left a modern day legacy where Virginia's Indians struggle to achieve federal recognition because they cannot prove their heritage as required by federal law. Do you see the hypocrisy in that? The same entity that you're looking for federal recognition is the same one that has requirements that you cannot provide, according to what this article is saying. You see the backwardsness of that. So it's like saying you want to be recognized by them, but they have requirements that they know you can't provide. Uh, so many little clues to why we should not be in the system, but I think it just goes over a lot of people's heads, I guess. I don't know. So, the United States corporation policy for so-called whites. That policy is the right to self-define, regardless of blood, is granted. That's a right that's granted to who they're calling white. They named you, they decide what you will be in their system. Paying to play Indian. The Dodge rolls and the legacy of $5 Indians paying a commissioner $5 could get an opportunistic white person on the Dodge rolls. But again, is it the white person that's doing this or a policy that, you know, just like the immigrants that come here? Is it them that's inviting themselves, or is it some government policy? So $5, good damn, your birthright sold for $5 fucking dollars. They couldn't even make it like a solid 1,000. Damn. Damn. $5 could get an opportunistic white person on the Dawes Road 125 years ago, which still causes problems for tribes today. So see, the federal tribes are still having problems, right? But they get a payday and they shut up. I'll never forget the tribe that had people that would be otherwise called colored. But when the feds were going to give some big ass grant, that tribe had to get rid of the real Indians. I'm just going to say it like that. Because why would the federal government go through so much trouble just to make sure that your Negro ass don't get a payday, even when you're in a federal tribe? And Indians think we could work with this. They think, oh, that's okay. Well, uh, it's, you know, no, I don't. I truly don't know, and neither do you. But you're going forward anyway, right? You think that being under federal and playing by their rules and that's going to get you to where you need to be. It's just going to get you into deeper slavery. And I can say this as an American Indian because I'm not advocating violence. No, I'm not. I'm advocating activation of my status as Indian not taxed. So I will always say that this is not waging war with the corporation. This is what they would call a civil issue. And it's a criminal one as well. But it is not a terroristic one, unfortunately. It's not that. I know that there's voices that would like to call this that, but again, it's just another diversion tactic. I'm an American Indian, a peaceful American, but I talk the truth of what the genocide is about because it is still going on in many different forms. And so, as an American Indian, I have to be aware of those as much as possible. That's all. So this is more a defense than an offense. So $5 to get an opportunistic white person and black and Indians too on the Dawes Roll. But see, once you're in that jurisdiction, that's why it's okay now for you to be in it. As long as you're nice, docile, quote unquote, civilized Indian that don't have no land rights and quarantine on a reservation, now you can be in that type of it. Why is that? Well, it's because the colonizing entity wants to control everything on our land. That's why. And they can't afford you little birthright Indians talking about you can't do that because this is my land. So they shut that noise down by making you federal or federally dependent when we're not supposed to be either of those. 125 years ago, and this still causes problems for tribes today. It may be fashionable to play Indian now, but it was also trendy 125 years ago when people paid $5 a piece for falsified documents declaring them native on the Dawes Roll. These so-called $5 Indians paid government agents under the table in order to reap the benefits that came with having Indian blood. Mainly white men with an appetite for land. $5 Indians paid to register on the Dawes Rolls, earning fraudulent enrollment in tribes along with benefits inherited by generations to come, y'all. That's your birthright, y'all. These were opportunistic white men who wanted access to land for food rations, said Gregory Smithers, associate professor of history at Virginia Commonwealth University. These were people who were more than happy to exploit the Dawes Commission and government agents for $5, were willing to turn a blind eye to the graft and corruption. So those are the websites. I'll link them, you know, when I post the video at some point. I just wanted to juxtapose the two different policies. It kind of helps to see that this is why, quote unquote, black Indians could not be Indians, because the right column will let you see that it had something to do with land. So our land was being taken. This is what's not being said in our reclassification, but is loud and clear in the hijack of the Dawes Rolls. So I believe this means a resurrecting of the actual names of the lands as the linguistic territories. That would be a start. Algonquin territory, you know, any territory that has on that linguistic map. And where is that? Do I have that map? And sometimes I like to show it. Oh, it's there. So this is the lands that are hiding under the states. In order for Indians to resurrect their birthright, this is the delineations we go by, American Indians. You're not in a state. You can't be, okay? Because this is the land that was stolen and it's hiding under the states. But it's still there, and at least for a time, they'll coexist, right? Um, it, the spirit of the land knows who belongs to it. And if any people stay here, they will have to honor the people in order to be on the land. And I'm talking about the real Indians. So on that note, I think I'm going to close out. Thank you for watching. Till next time, I wish you peace, health, wealth, your land back, your identity back, and all the great things. Till next time. Thank you again.